Pat Gelsinger is the CEO of Intel. He's a tech industry pioneer and played a key role in developing several groundbreaking technologies such as USB, Wi-Fi, and Intel's line of leading computer chips. Gelsinger was also Intel's first chief technology officer and the brains behind its legendary 486 processor. He rejoined Intel as CEO in 2021 after a successful run as the CEO of VMware. Pat, always good to see you here. So you're 8 months officially into the top job at Intel. Now that you can look back a little bit, what are some of the three biggest changes you've made to the company?
Well, first thing was we rolled out a new strategy, right? We said very clearly, without ambiguity, we are going to be an IDM and we're going to be an IDM 2.0. As we said, and we're going to double down on manufacturing. We're going to become a foundry for the industry, and we are just on it to bring back our process and unquestioned process package leadership, right? So I said, number one, we just, semiconductors are important to the world. We are going to be the biggest, baddest semiconductor supplier on the planet. Secondly, we said, boy, we have to rebuild our execution engine. And to do that, I've laid out a new organization. I've brought in new leaders and said, here are the 6 business units that we are going to be focused on. Here's how we're going to align the entire corporate structure against that. We have leaders in each of those roles who I think are, not only super qualified for the roles that I've put them into, but maybe they're the best humans on the planet for the assignment that we put. I really think that we're building out the dream team for Intel. So, a team, a clear organization to go execute on that assignment. And then finally, we have to bring back the culture. I've called it the Grovian disciplines. We have to rebuild this, execution, this detailed, data-driven, engineering-driven, paranoia of the competition, commitment to our customers' culture. And, so we're underway on doing that. And, if I would have sat at the beginning of the year and said, hey, this is what I got to get done this year, I think most people would have said, okay, that sounds about right. Clear strategy, and as Colin said, get the bus pointed in the right direction, get the right seats on the bus, the right butts in the right seats on the bus, and then the right, say culture, camaraderie, commitment to the future. I think we're on track to what I said we'd get done and maybe a bit ahead of schedule.
It sounds like a turnaround is brewing at Intel, Pat. Why is Intel in a turnaround? I think leadership in what it does. How did the company get here?
Yeah, I think over the decade, some bad decisions, lack of, I'll say, manic technology focus on the part of the company, business leadership, not that they were bad, but they were business leaders. They weren't technology leaders, some stumbles around the process technology roadmap, lack of clear leadership in the products and, underinvestment in some of the key areas like our manufacturing and capacity. So all of these sort of accumulated together to get the company to a position that it wasn't a leader. And didn't have that sense of iconic leadership, the company that put silicon into Silicon Valley. And in the period where silicon is becoming more important than ever to the planet, it's time for us to not only turn around but step up and to unquestionably lead.
Is part of the secret to this turnaround, Pat, you started at the company at 18. How big an advantage is it that you have that insider knowledge of when Intel was great?
Yeah, and I'd say, I think there's people that could do this job beside me, but I think I'm qualified, right? And the 30 years that I had with the company, when I say Grovian, half the company knows what I mean, right? There's so much that depth, and I grew up at the feet of Noyce and Moore. I just did an interview of Gordon Moore, maybe the last interview he does while he's on this earth. When I can, with extraordinary depth of experience, passions, these sentiments, these understandings of some of the history of the company, and that's a big leg up. I'd also say the clear support of the board of directors. And, I was asked, well, how did you make some of these decisions so quickly? And I says, well, I started to make them in January when I was interviewing with the board. right? I had a clear thesis for what I wanted to do. And part of the calling of me was the unanimous support of the board for me and for the vision that we were laying out. So, that strength of conviction, and then, the ability then to sort of bridge the old, but also the experiences of the last 11 years being outside of the company, new cultural understandings, industry, software understandings, and combining those together. This is a good period and one that I'm extraordinarily motivated as I come back to what I've called as my dream job.
Part of that strategy, Pat, is what you have called bring Intel back to unquestioned leadership by 2025. What does Intel look like by 2025?
Well, and everything is building from today to there. So it isn't like we're waiting until 2025 and voila, right? We are making progress each day along it. And, we'll be rolling out our Alder Lake products. Hey, that's the best desktop product. By 2025, we are talking about inching ahead of the competition, but having miles between us and the competition. It's about our process technologies where we're, sort of clawing our way back, and building this 5 technology nodes in 4 years, an extraordinary cadence of process technology where everyone in the world says in 2025, oh, whose transistors are the best in the world? Intel's by far. The manufacturing capacity that we'll have rolled out by then, the leadership that we'll have reestablished in the data center, and these 4 new business areas that I've talked about rolling out: leadership in accelerated graphics and GPUs, high performance computing, unquestioned leadership in the transformation of the network and the edge, unquestioned broad deployment of autonomous vehicles and leading the establishment of that category, and being one of the largest foundries in the world for the industry writ large. And by 2025, all of those businesses are going to be at scale, measured in billions of revenue and unquestioned leadership in their respective industry category as well. That's a pretty powerful picture of where we're going to be by 2025.
There's 2 theses out there, at least on Wall Street, that I see among many. One, the likes of an AMD and an NVIDIA, these companies are just light years ahead. Poke hole in that one for me.
Clearly, we've given them room. We've given them way too much space in the market to be uncontested. And, as I mentioned with the client product, hey, we're about to release the best client products, period, that have ever been built. And we're not going to slow down. Right, in the data center, hey, we're about to release Sapphire Rapids, the best server part in the industry, and we're just going to get faster. We're going to, start releasing the highest performance HPC and AI benchmarks in the world and start scaling those new products into the marketplace. Our customers are begging us, right, saying, hey, we want good alternatives. We're going to give them to them as well. And many of those products start ramping in Q1 of next year. So I think by the time that we're having this conversation late next year, Brian, I think the world's going to be really different.
So this leading position those companies have, they can't continue. It can't continue forever. Tech is constantly changing here. But the street doesn't get it, I think, Pat. They don't get it yet.
Well, they're skeptical. Can we turn this around? It's been 8 months, right? How fast can these things happen? They've become the darlings of, many in the industry, and they've done well. We have to give them credit. They've had good periods of execution. They've done good things, but Intel is back, right? The geek is back. Our role, right? This deep, passionate view that we're going to deliver the best products. They're going to be high quality. We're going to scale them at volume. We're going to satisfy our customers better with them. And each one of these things is gaining momentum in the marketplace. So, I look at our skeptics and I'll say, just wait, right? Because we're building the evidence base that is going to take the worst of skeptics today and turn them into the most ardent of believers tomorrow.
As a veteran of industry battles, Pat, what would a NVIDIA and ARM deal, what does that mean to the chip industry? What would it mean to the chip industry?
Yeah, well, we've publicly said we don't think that's a great idea, right? We think that, part of the strength of the ARM ecosystem, has been the fact that it's nominally independent, right? And others can view it as that independent architecture. So, we've said, I don't think it's a good deal. so far there's been a lot of skepticism expressed across a different set of industry groups, governments as well. So, we're doubtful it will occur as well. But if it occurs or not, hey, we just view it as one of those industry things, and our job is to deliver, the best products around the x86 family. We're using the ARM architecture in some of our product lines. We're going to make it one of the staple offerings of our foundry business. But we've also said we're going to have the richest architectural ecosystem of any, because we're going to have unquestioned leadership in x86. We're building out a full portfolio of AI capabilities. We're going to have the ARM and the RISC-V ecosystems available through our foundry offerings as well. So we will have unquestioned leadership on the most important architecture and, the richest offerings on all the other architectural alternatives as well.
I was thinking back, Pat, when you first started and we spoke early on, one of your first calls among many, I'm sure, was to Apple and CEO Tim Cook and trying to get, I guess some of that business back. Now that you've settled into the role here, what's the relationship with Apple like?
Apple's a great company. We certainly respect their innovations, and we do a number of products with them today. Obviously, they've moved the core of their product line to their own M1 and its derivative family. Because they thought they could do a better chip, and they've done a good job with that. My job is to win them back and to deliver products that are better than they can do themselves. We also want to win them to more of our foundry offerings over time, and that just makes sense, right? Everybody wants to have multiple suppliers, and if we have the best process technology in the industry, of course they'll come our way. But we view these decisions are long decisions. They don't flip architectures arbitrarily. Nobody does. Those should be contemplated very carefully. So this is many years in the future. And between now and then, we are reviving the PC ecosystem. We're building out our foundry business, and we're aggressively pursuing unquestioned product leadership that our customers can build the best computing experiences of any available in the industry. And if we're doing that, we're just going to do fine over time.
Do you think it takes a couple of years to get a good chunk of Apple business back? And what could you get back?
Well, as I said, we would hope to have them using more of our products over time, more of our technologies in different spaces, hoping to use our foundry at different points in time. But these are long-term decisions, Brian. If they started the design tomorrow, if somebody came to us and said, hey, we want to go do a major foundry offering with you today, it's not till 25 that hits any volume. Couple of years to make the decision, couple of years to do the design. These are long-term decisions. So, we're very, very, I think, pragmatic about what that might take. But we're also very clear-minded that if we're doing the best products, the best process technology, the best packaging technology that's available anywhere in the industry, they and others will make very pragmatic choices on picking the best set of things they can do to build the best products for their customers.
Let's switch gears a little bit, Pat. You've been a champion of the CHIPS Act. You've met with President Biden. You've been traveling the world. Why in the world has this not passed the House yet? I kind of could get it a little bit, but this is needed and it's long overdue.
Well, you've probably asked a question that my political IQ is somewhat inadequate to fully answer the question. But, there's been a lot of things going through the House. With dealing with debt ceilings and infrastructure packages and the other things associated with it. And, my government affairs team, many of the political insiders give good confidence that this will be done this year. And to me, that's critical. And I would say, everybody listening to this, tell your congressman you want this done this year, right? You don't get Christmas break until this is done. This year, get it across the line, good bipartisan support, good bicameral support, get it finished. And I believe it's so critical. Here we are in the semiconductor crisis, and we've realized we've allowed so much of the manufacturing base to move to a very small and concentrated areas in Asia. And as I've said, the world needs geographically balanced, resilient supply chain. Semiconductors, as the world becomes more digital, semiconductors are permeating every aspect of human existence, every aspect of our economy, every aspect of our national security. this is more important than where oil reserves are. Let's build the fabs where we want them, Brian. Let's get this lab to fab supply chain where it meets our economic and national security interests. That message has resonated in the US, also resonated very strongly in Europe. We've seen the European version of the CHIPS Act making very rapid progress there. And we believe that this just allows us to rebalance the supply chain to assure the technology leadership of our nation, our industry, and the world.
Hey, if I can grab a shovel, Pat, and help you build some of these founders, I certainly would. Two things to unpack there. If there is no CHIPS Act this year, how long does this chip supply shortage, which you mentioned is a crisis, how long would that continue?
Yeah, with or without the CHIPS Act, we think we still have some rough road in front of us. And I've said, we believe the chip shortage is at its worst right now. It will get incrementally better as we go through 22, but we expect the shortage to persist into 23. It just takes that long to build capacity. Now, if the CHIPS Act doesn't pass, if the European Act doesn't pass, we think the slope of the recovery dampens. If it passes, I'm announcing our next fab, right? I mean, I am, shovels go into ground more rapidly if this gets put into place. So let's get it done at that level so that we can, increase the slope of the recovery more rapidly. But it's also, as Winston Churchill said, never waste a good crisis. If we come out of this and we haven't created the environment for a more geographically balanced supply chain and we become more dependent on Asia, right? How terrible, right? That we haven't really fixed the problem. And as we well know, some of these areas in the world are very geopolitically unstable. Let's build back better, right? As the Biden campaign included in its political process. Build back in the way that we want these to occur. The CHIPS Act is critical. We want these fabs on American and European soil, and we're ready to step up, build bigger and faster, right, with the investments of the government.
Is it a national security issue that so much of our chips are being made in China?
Absolutely. Right. This is an unquestioned issue. And I think everybody was somewhat lulled into sleep of the efficiency, the cost benefits of supply chain versus the resilience and the national content of the supply chain. And I think that, is one of the great wake-up calls that has resulted from COVID. And I think everybody is now starting to realize the precarity of the current situation. And we're encouraged by the enthusiasm we're seeing from, the intelligence, the defense community. And we would just call, everybody to say, let's get these things done. Let's build back much more rapidly. It's time for us to change the arc of how the industry looks, that as we go to the second half of this decade, we all feel confident. I've described this moonshot that today the US is at 12%, Europe's at 9%. We said by the end of the decade, let's go to 30% in the US and 20% in Europe, which would get us almost back to where we were in 1990, right, in US and Europe. And what a tremendous turnaround of momentum, right, technology, foundations for the most important thing for humanity. Everything is going digital. Time for us to make this change now.
Given that we are still so reliant on the supply chains out of China, as we have had this change in administrations, has it become any easier doing business in the country?
Not really. We'd say, largely the policies have sort of been, a continuation of the Trump policies. We have clearly argued that, hey, having more of our products shipping and available to the Chinese market, helps us to fund our R&D and our capital, right, which is heavily biased to US and Europe. So, let's benefit from that to go drive our investments in innovation. It actually creates more dependency on American technologies there. This is a good trade policy, even as we want to carefully, position ourselves for sustainable leadership in this industry for the long term. So, we'd say there's good trade and economic policy objectives that sit in front of us. And we're clearly working with the administration to make some of those steps. And, I think the political rhetoric Time to get past that. We need actionable trade and economic policies that allow us to not only continue, but increase our business in China, even as we create more opportunities for competitive leadership in the world landscape.
Pat, if we're sitting here 5 years from now having this conversation, hopefully it's in a studio. I'm not sitting in my home studio. Let's just call it that. After you can see my sink a little bit behind me. But what?
Hey, I'll take a cappuccino there.
Yeah, well, all right. I could duly get you one very quickly. But what do you think the long-term impact of the pandemic is going to be on society and even the tech sector?
So unquestionably, the tech sector has seen a large accelerant from COVID, right? And we've seen, part of the reason we have the semiconductor shortages, demand was increasing for semiconductors 5-ish%. COVID moved it to 20%. Wow, an enormous acceleration. It disrupted supply chains. They went negative for a year, right? And now we're building up. Semiconductor supply this year will increase 15%, but an extraordinary acceleration in technology. And we all know that. Right? Our kids are going to school online. We're all working online more. We're educating online. We're seeing more cloud services, Grubhubs and everything. Deliveries are, every aspect of our life has become more digital, and it's accelerating. And it isn't just some of those, I'll say consumerish things, but how do you think mRNA happened? I mean, it took us 35 years to create an influenza vaccine, right? We created mRNA-based COVID vaccines in under a year. This is because of computing technology, because of digitization of healthcare and medical research as well. So it's this extraordinary accelerant of the digitization of humanity. And as we think about that, when we're sitting here 5 years from now, there's going to be these things that we would have never dreamed of before. If you say over the last 20 years, my iPhone and my social experiences, et cetera, we're going to have many of those have become, hey, oh yeah, I go to the office every, once a month. We go in for our team sprints and things, but otherwise I work where I want to work because it's so productive, so effective, such an improvement in the quality of life. We don't think we ever go back, right, to saying we all show up, we all burn, hours a day in commute traffic. That's the exception, not the rule. We're going to see an explosion in how we educate online, how we provide care online. These social systems are going to settle into how our lives as we mix both physical as well as virtual. I call it the phygital, right? Experiences of the future. So we don't think there's a going back. It's just a huge accelerant in the digitization of humanity.
What's your message to other CEOs in that type of environment who are trying to plan for the long term? I mean, it requires a different type of leadership, a different type of executive, a different type of CEO. I would say even a different type of board of directors to be thinking about these new just things that are going to creep up.
Yeah, and every business becomes a technology business. And I would say, let's just pick one example: AI. Right? There's two kinds of companies. There are those that are going to embrace AI and advance their business, or those that are going to be disrupted by AI because somebody else is. Right? You only got two choices. Which one do you want to be on? So every CEO says, how am I embracing AI into the core of my business? And with that, you need quality technologists who sit on your leadership team, right? And hey, as a technologist, when I have, half of my staff is PhDs now, it's much easier for me than for other companies to sort of say, okay, how are we doing wafer inspection using AI techniques? Right? We have to embed it deeply into our processes every day. How do I better predict the supply chain using AI techniques than they ever were predicted before in this very disruptive time? So every aspect of your business needs to say, how am I leveraging what I've called the superpowers of ubiquitous compute, seamless connectivity, the scale of infrastructure and AI for superpowers? How am I bringing that into my leadership team? Right. And if I don't have it, go hire it. I need somebody who's sitting at that chair, who's driving this at the highest levels of every company into every business practice. This needs to become an agenda on the part of every board of directors. Okay, yeah, you need to make sure that you're, have the audit committee approval, the comp committee approval, and the technology committee approval as well. And that becomes more important than the audit or the comp committee going forward. All of this becomes central to every business. And we're seeing that in many cases, but I think still many haven't yet realized the full breadth of what's going to happen to their business and their industries over the coming decade.
Well said. Well, Pat, I'm no PhD, but I do make a mean cappuccino and espresso. So, maybe I will have one sent to you. You have a big giant company to go run. Pat Gelsinger, always good to see you. Thanks for carving out some time for us. And maybe we get to share that espresso sometime in person soon.
I look forward to it, Saz. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it.